Come here, stinking black ape!
Sorry?
I need a body, and you've got the honor of being chosen.
Conrad Hartwell, 6'7", skull shaved, tattoos down both arms, ripped the mop from Jasper's hands. It won't hurt.
You look like you could use a nice long bed rest. I never agreed to this.
Enraged, he grabbed Jasper by the hair and dragged him to the center of the training mat.
Who gave you permission to talk back to me, stinking janitor?
Conrad locked an arm around Jasper's neck, hoisted him into the air, and slammed him onto the mat. Then pressed his foot on Jasper's chest.
First warning.
Jasper lay on the wet mat.
Get up! I'm not done yet!
Jasper smiles.
Are you sure? You promised not to cry.
Conrad would understand exactly what that meant. Hartwell Academy of Martial Arts sat between a laundromat and a nail salon in a strip mall outside Charlotte, North Carolina. The sign out front read, "Home of the Hartwell Combat System, founded by Grandmaster Conrad Hartwell." Gold letters on black. Inside, trophy cases lined the walls, regional championships, a framed TV segment, photos of Conrad standing over defeated opponents, arms raised, veins popping. This was Conrad's kingdom, and everyone in it lived by his rules. Jasper Townsend had been the night janitor here for 3 years. 5 nights a week, 9 p.m. to 4 a.m., he mopped the training mats, scrubbed the locker rooms, emptied the trash. His paycheck was $800 every 2 weeks. Most of it went to rent and his grandmother's medication. He was 34 years old and looked like he hadn't eaten a full meal in months. Because he hadn't. Dinner was usually white rice and canned beans. Some nights, just water. His body told that story. Narrow shoulders, collarbones sharp enough to cut shadow, ribs visible through every shirt he owned. But if you looked closer, something didn't add up. His forearms were wrapped in flat, dense muscle that clung to bone like rope around a post. His wrists rotated with a speed that didn't match his frame. His hands, rough from bleach and mop handles, moved with a precision that had nothing to do with cleaning. Jasper Townsend had been training since he was 6 years old. His grandfather, Master Sergeant Clarence Townsend, was a black Marine who served in Okinawa in the early 1960s. While stationed there, he studied Shotokan karate and judo under local masters. He and his training partner, a young white Marine named Ellis Monroe, spent 4 years developing their own combat system. Pure application. No belts, no trophies, no commercial packaging. Just technique built for survival. Clarence came home, never opened a school, never sold a lesson. He taught one student, his grandson. Every morning before school, every evening after homework, for 13 years straight until the day he died. Jasper was 19 then. He never stopped training. Every night after mopping, he practiced alone on the mats, barefoot, silent. The same forms his grandfather taught him on the porch of a house that no longer existed. He had no belt, no certificate, no record, just a body that remembered everything. Now, Conrad Hartwell. The man was impossible to miss. 6'7", over 260 pounds of raw muscle, shaved skull that reflected the overhead lights, tribal tattoos crawling from his wrists to his shoulders, disappearing under the black tank top he wore every single day like a uniform of intimidation. His eyes were pale and calculating. When he spoke, people listened. When he moved, people stepped back. But 30 years ago, Conrad Hartwell was nobody. He was a 22-year-old white kid sitting in the back row of Clarence Townsend's informal training group. He learned for 11 months. Then Clarence caught him using techniques on weaker students outside of class, choking a teenager behind a grocery store for practice. Clarence expelled him on the spot. Conrad took what he'd learned, watered it down, repackaged it, and built an empire. He called it the Hartwell Combat System. He called himself the founder. He had no idea his night janitor was Clarence Townsend's grandson. Then there was Denise Caldwell, 40 years old, senior student, 4 nights a week. She'd been loyal to the academy for 6 years, until last October. During a sparring session, Conrad grabbed a 16-year-old student's hand and bent his index finger backward until it snapped. Called it a training accident. The boy's parents didn't press charges. Denise said nothing, but she started recording. Her phone captured every class from the back row. And 3 months ago, through the rear window of the dojo at 1M, she saw something that changed everything. The janitor was moving on the mats, and he was moving like nothing she had ever seen in Conrad Hartwell's class. It started on a Saturday. Conrad was running a weekend self-defense seminar, 30 paying students, $50 a head. His assistant instructor called in sick. He needed a demo body. Jasper was mopping the back hallway when Conrad's shadow filled the doorway. "Put that down. You're coming with me." "I'm not a student, sir." "I didn't ask what you are. I said come." Conrad grabbed the back of Jasper's collar and marched him into the training room. 30 students sat cross-legged on the mat. Parents lined the back wall. Conrad shoved Jasper to the center and turned to the class. "Today's lesson: how to neutralize a larger attacker." He paused, looked Jasper up and down, and grinned. "Well, a smaller one works too." The room laughed. Jasper stood there in his faded blue uniform, arms at his sides, saying nothing. Conrad didn't warn him. He shot in low, wrapped both arms around Jasper's waist, and lifted him off the ground like a bag of laundry, then slammed him down. The mat shook. "That's a basic double leg. Notice the hip drive." Jasper got up. Conrad grabbed him again, this time by the throat. Lifted, slammed. Harder. See how his body has zero resistance? That's what happens when your only training is pushing a mop. Jasper got up again, third time. Conrad hooked Jasper's leg, swept him, and drove him into the mat with his full 260-pound frame on top. Even a mop learns to fall after enough drops. The room roared, but one student in the second row stopped laughing. She'd noticed something no one else caught. Every single time Jasper hit the mat, his body rotated at the last fraction of a second. His arm tucked. His chin dropped. His hip absorbed the impact before his spine ever touched the surface. Textbook ukemi. Breakfall technique so clean it made no sound at all. That student was Denise Caldwell, and she didn't say a word. She just shifted her phone slightly in her lap and kept recording. Jasper picked up his mop and walked back to the hallway. His shoulder was bruised. His uniform was torn at the collar now, too. But his breathing was perfectly even. After that Saturday seminar, Conrad found a new favorite hobby. Jasper became a permanent fixture in every evening class. Not as a student, but as a body. Monday night, intermediate class. Conrad was demonstrating a roundhouse kick to the midsection. He called Jasper up from the supply closet. Didn't ask, just pointed and snapped his fingers like he was calling a dog. Jasper walked to the center of the mat. Conrad swung. The kick landed flush on Jasper's left hip. Not a demonstration, a full contact strike. Jasper staggered sideways but stayed on his feet. "Good, he can take it." Conrad turned to the class. "That's what muscle memory looks like." "Oh, wait, he doesn't have any muscle." Laughter. Wednesday night, advanced class. Conrad needed a body for a knee strike to the abdomen. He drove his knee straight into Jasper's stomach. Jasper doubled over, air leaving his lungs in a single sharp breath. Conrad patted his back like he was burping a child. "You good, mop man? Don't bleed on my mats." Then came the moment that almost broke the pattern. Conrad told Jasper to kneel on the mat. He needed to demonstrate a rear chokehold from a standing position and wanted Jasper on his knees. Jasper looked at the 40 students watching. He looked at Conrad, and he said it clearly enough for the back row to hear. "I'll stand for the demo. I don't kneel." The room went quiet. Conrad's jaw tightened. A vein in his neck pulsed. But there were parents watching. He couldn't make a scene bigger than the one Jasper had just made. He moved on, but his eyes stayed on Jasper the rest of the night. Cold. Measuring. 2 days later, Conrad pulled Jasper into the staff office. 3 instructors sat around a laptop. On the screen, security camera footage from 1 a.m. the night before. Jasper, alone on the mats, moving through forms in the dark. Barefoot, silent, precise. Conrad hit pause. Look at this. The janitor thinks he's Bruce Lee. The instructors laughed. Conrad played it again in slow motion. I call it the janitor's little dance. He told the staff to lock up the dojo an hour earlier from now on. No more midnight performances. Then Conrad pulled a crumpled old gi from under the desk and threw it at Jasper's feet. Put it on. If you want to play fighter after hours, at least look the part. Jasper didn't pick it up. Conrad used his foot to push the gi against Jasper's shoe. No? Jasper stepped over it and walked out. Take up the mop instead, Conrad shouted after him. That's your uniform. That night, Jasper started writing. A small notebook, dates, times, exact words, names of everyone present. He didn't tell anyone. He just wrote it all down. Friday night. Full class. Conrad was teaching how to handle a street attacker. He called Jasper up. Without warning, he threw a straight punch at Jasper's face, stopped 1 inch from his nose. A control technique, testing reflexes. Jasper didn't flinch. Conrad blinked, then smiled. Not bad for a toilet scrubber. Next session, same drill, but this time Conrad didn't stop. He drove an open palm strike into Jasper's chest. Jasper stumbled back 2 steps but kept his footing. Conrad stepped forward and slapped Jasper's face, once, then again. Not hard enough to bruise, hard enough to turn his head. Go mop the bathrooms. Class is for fighters. Denise Caldwell sat in the back row, phone angled in her lap, red dot blinking. The following week, Blake Emerson, Conrad's top student, 24 years old, 220 of solid muscle, found Jasper in the parking lot after class. Heard you like to practice in the dark. Let's see what you've got. Blake shoved Jasper against the side of a van. Jasper didn't swing. He redirected Blake's momentum with one hand on the wrist and one on the shoulder. Blake slid past and hit the ground. No force, just physics. Blake got up, red-faced, and drove off. The next morning, he told Conrad that Jasper got lucky. Conrad stopped believing in luck. He called Jasper to his office. On the desk sat a printed contract. Staff Appreciation Sparring Exhibition. Conrad poured himself a glass of water, took a sip, then poured the rest onto Jasper's shoes. Water pooled around the worn soles. Sign it, or walk out in those wet shoes and don't come back. Jasper looked down at his soaked shoes. He needed this job. $800 every 2 weeks. His grandmother's blood pressure pills cost $140. Rent was due in 9 days. He signed. Conrad leaned back. Smart mop. Then he picked up the phone and called Blake. Get Travis and Kyle, 3 rounds. We rotate. He's skin and bones. 3 rounds and he folds. He paused. I want everyone in that room to see what happens when a mop pretends to be a sword. That night, Conrad sat alone in his office watching the security footage again. He paused on a single frame. Jasper, mid-technique, left hand chambered, right foot at a 45-degree angle. Conrad stared at it for a long time. Something about that stance was familiar. Something he hadn't seen in 30 years. He couldn't place it. He turned off the screen and left, but his hands were shaking when he locked the door. The day before the exhibition, Jasper was mopping the main hallway. Conrad walked past with a group of students, laughing about something. Without breaking stride, he kicked Jasper's mop bucket. Dirty water flooded the floor. Jasper knelt to clean it. Conrad stopped, walked back, placed his foot on the mop handle Jasper was reaching for and pressed down. That's where you belong. On your knees. Remember that tomorrow when you step on my mat. He turned and walked away with his students. The laughter faded down the corridor. Jasper stayed on the floor, hands still. Then he looked up, down the empty hallway where Conrad had just disappeared. And he smiled. That same calm, cold smile. He already knew exactly how tomorrow would end. Jasper walked through the door at 4:30 a.m. Ruth was at the kitchen table. She always waited up. She saw the bruise spreading across his chest, the red marks on his cheek, the water-dark shoes. She didn't ask what happened. She already knew. "They did the same thing to your grandfather," she said quietly. "And your grandfather didn't meal either." She went to the bedroom and came back with a leather-bound journal, hand-drawn technique diagrams, faded training notes, and a photograph from 1964. 2 young Marines sparring barefoot on a dirt floor in Okinawa, one black, one white. The back read, "Clarence and Ellis, building something that lasts." Ruth picked up the phone. 3 calls, 40 minutes. She found Ellis Monroe in a veterans care facility in Virginia, 88 years old, mind still sharp. He agreed to testify if the time came. Next morning, Denise Caldwell called Jasper. She had months of footage, every class, every hit, every word Conrad ever said on camera. Jasper told her to hold it. Not yet. Saturday, 6 p.m. The dojo was packed. Folding chairs lined every wall. Parents, students, local business owners, a reporter from the county paper. Conrad had promoted the annual open house for weeks. Flyers in every barbershop and coffee shop in town. Come see the Hartwell combat system in action. Conrad stood at the center of the mat in a pressed black gi, arms folded across his massive chest, tattoos visible from the collar to his knuckles. He welcomed the crowd with a speech about discipline, tradition, and the warrior spirit he'd built from the ground up. His voice filled the room without a microphone. Then he grinned. "Before we start our main demonstrations, we've got a little bonus for you tonight." He turned toward the hallway. "Our own staff member has volunteered to step onto the mat. Let's give a warm round of applause to our janitor, Jasper." Scattered clapping, a few confused looks. Jasper appeared in the doorway. Faded blue work pants, a plain white t-shirt, the cleanest thing he owned. No shoes, no gi, no belt. His collarbones cast shadows under the overhead lights. His arms hung loose at his sides, lean muscle visible only when he moved. Conrad walked over and shoved Jasper's shoulder from behind. Jasper stumbled forward 2 steps. "Careful, janitor, the mat's slippery." Conrad winked at the crowd. "He should know. He mopped it." Laughter. Jasper stepped to the center of the mat. He said nothing. On the other side stood Blake Emerson in a crisp white gi, black belt tied tight. Behind Blake, 2 assistant instructors, Travis Dunn and Kyle Brewer, both over 200 pounds, both warmed up and ready. 3 against 1, 3 rounds. 3 men trained by Conrad Hartwell against a janitor in work pants who weighed less than any of them by at least 50 pounds. Conrad raised his hand. Round 1. Travis came in fast, a straight rush, arms wide, going for a tackle. Jasper didn't move until the last half second. Then he pivoted, 1 step to the left, 1 hand on Travis's wrist, and redirected the bigger man's momentum past him. Travis stumbled to the edge of the mat. The crowd murmured. Travis came again, harder. He swung a wide hook at Jasper's head. Jasper ducked under it, not dramatically, not with flair, just enough to let the fist pass over his skull by an inch. Then he stepped inside Travis's guard and pushed him off balance with a forearm to the chest. Travis hit the mat flat on his back. No one laughed this time. Travis got up, confused. He looked at Conrad. Conrad nodded. "Keep going." Travis charged a 3rd time. Jasper sidestepped, caught his arm, and guided him face first to the mat with a wrist control so smooth it looked like Travis had decided to lie down on his own. The crowd gasped. Round 2. Kyle Brewer was smarter. He circled, threw jabs to test distance. Jasper absorbed 2 to the shoulder, giving ground, reading the rhythm. Kyle threw a front kick. Jasper caught the ankle midair, twisted his hip, and sent Kyle spinning to the floor. No wasted motion, no aggression. Just physics shaped by 30 years of repetition. Kyle got up and rushed in with a clinch. He had 60 pounds on Jasper. He locked his arms around Jasper's torso and squeezed. For a moment, it looked over, the bigger man crushing the smaller one. But Jasper's hips dropped. His center of gravity shifted lower than seemed possible for his frame. He broke the clinch with a technique that didn't exist in Conrad's curriculum, an inside sweep that used Kyle's own weight to buckle his knee. Kyle went down hard. He stayed down for 3 full seconds before getting up. The dojo was completely silent now. Jasper stood at the center of the mat, breathing even, hands open at his sides. Not a scratch on him. His white t-shirt wasn't even untucked. 140 pounds of bone and rope muscle standing perfectly still, while 2 men over 200 pounds tried to figure out what just happened. Round 3. Blake Emerson stepped onto the mat. He was the best Conrad had. 24 years old, tournament medals, 4 years of training under the Hartwell combat system. He bounced on his toes, rolled his neck. This was supposed to be the finish. Blake came in with a combination: jab, cross, low kick, fast, technical. Jasper slipped the jab, parried the cross, and checked the kick with his shin. The contact echoed through the room. Blake's eyes widened. That shin felt like iron, not bone. Blake reset, came again. This time a spinning back fist. Jasper ducked it clean, stepped behind Blake, and waited. Blake spun around and found Jasper standing right there, calm, hands still open. "Come on!" Conrad barked from the sideline. Blake lunged, both hands reaching for a double-leg takedown. Jasper sprawled, caught Blake's collar with his left hand, hooked his right arm under Blake's armpit, loaded his hip, and threw. 1 throw. Clean. Textbook. Blake's body rotated in the air and hit the mat flat on his back. The sound was like a door slamming shut on everything Conrad Hartwell had ever built. The room didn't clap. The room didn't breathe. 80 people sat frozen. Jasper reached down and offered Blake his hand, pulled him up, bowed, not to Conrad, not to the crowd, to Blake. Then he turned and walked off the mat, barefoot, silent, the same way he walked every night after mopping. But in the front row, something was happening that no one else noticed. Conrad Hartwell's face had changed. Not anger, not embarrassment, something deeper, something older. He recognized that throw. Not the watered-down version he taught in his advanced class, the original, the hip rotation, the collar grip, the angle of entry. He'd seen it exactly once before, 30 years ago, on a dirt floor, performed by a black Marine who'd expelled him for violence. Conrad's mouth opened slightly. His tattooed arms dropped to his sides. He stared at the hallway where Jasper had disappeared. He didn't know yet. Not fully. But something in his chest had cracked. Within an hour, the videos hit the internet. 12 different angles from 12 different phones. A skinny black janitor in work pants dismantling 3 trained fighters without throwing a single punch. The caption that stuck: "The mop guy just ended 3 black belts." By midnight, #MopMaster was trending in North Carolina. By Sunday morning, it had crossed state lines. Denise Caldwell watched the numbers climb from her apartment. Her own footage, months of Conrad's abuse, the slaps, the kicks, the humiliation, sat in a locked folder on her desktop. She hadn't uploaded it, not yet. She was waiting for the right moment, and she knew it was coming. Conrad filed the police report on Monday morning: assault and battery. He sat across from Officer Brenda Wallace at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg precinct with his arms folded and his jaw set. Blake Emerson sat next to him, wearing a foam cervical collar. "My student sustained a serious neck injury during what was supposed to be a friendly exhibition," Conrad said. "The janitor used excessive force. Reckless. Dangerous. He could have paralyzed this young man." Blake stared at the floor while Conrad talked. Officer Wallace took the statement. She looked at Blake. "Can you describe the incident in your own words?" Blake glanced at Conrad. Conrad gave a single nod, barely visible, but Wallace caught it. He threw me. Hard. My neck's been hurting since Saturday night. I can barely turn my head." Wallace wrote it down. She didn't say what she was thinking, but she circled 2 words in her notes: barely and Saturday. The report was filed on Monday. If the injury was that severe, why wait 48 hours? By Tuesday, the story hit local news. The county paper ran it first. Janitor injures student at martial arts exhibition. The TV station picked it up that evening. The anchor framed it exactly the way Conrad wanted: a reckless employee who attacked a young student during a supervised event. Jasper's phone buzzed with a text from the academy's office manager at 6 a.m. Wednesday. "Don't come in tonight. You're suspended pending investigation." No hearing, no conversation, just a text. Jasper sat at the kitchen table and did the math. $800 every 2 weeks. Rent due in 6 days. Ruth's blood pressure medication, $140, no refills left. Grocery money, already gone. The canned beans in the cabinet would last 4 days. After that, nothing. Ruth came out of her bedroom and saw his face. She didn't ask. She sat down across from him, put her hand on his, and said, "We've been broke before. We've never been broken." Conrad moved fast. By Thursday, he'd hired a local PR consultant, a woman named Gail Prescott, who specialized in reputation management for small businesses. Together, they built a narrative. Conrad Hartwell wasn't just a dojo owner. He was a protector, a mentor, a man who dedicated his life to teaching young people discipline. And this janitor, this untrained, unqualified janitor, had endangered one of his students. Gail coached Conrad for a 5-minute interview on the local evening news. Conrad wore a navy suit instead of his tank top. He spoke slowly. He shook his head at the right moments. "I feel responsible," he said into the camera. "I should never have let an untrained staff member onto the mat. That was my mistake. But the violence he used, that was his choice." The internet did the rest. The same platforms that had celebrated #MopMaster 3 days ago turned on Jasper overnight. Comments flooded in. "He could have killed that kid. Lock him up. Typical thug behavior." Someone started a counter hashtag, #MopMenace. It trended locally by Friday. Jasper didn't respond. He didn't post. He didn't defend himself. He sat in the small house with Ruth and read the comments on a cracked phone screen until Ruth took it from his hands and set it face down on the table. "Stop reading poison," she said. But behind the cameras and the hashtags, cracks were already forming. Wednesday night, Conrad called Blake to the office. The door was closed. The foam collar sat on the desk between them. Blake had taken it off the moment he'd left the precinct on Monday. "Keep wearing it," Conrad said. "Every time you leave this building, that collar goes on." Blake rubbed his neck. "Conrad, my neck is fine. The doctor said mild strain. I've had worse in sparring. I don't care what the doctor said. You wear it." Silence. Then Blake said something Conrad didn't expect. "He helped me up, after the throw. He didn't have to do that. 4 years I've trained here, and not once have you helped someone up after a demo." Conrad's jaw locked. "Are you comparing me to a janitor?" "I'm telling you what happened." "What happened is what I say happened. You understand that?" Blake looked at the collar on the desk. He picked it up. He put it on. but his eyes said something his mouth wouldn't. Not yet. Thursday night, alone in his office, Conrad pulled up a slow-motion clip of Jasper's final throw from 6 different angles. He watched it 14 times, frame by frame. The collar grip, the hip load, the 45-degree foot placement, the rotation. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a notebook he hadn't touched in years. His own training notes, scribbled 30 years ago in the back of a van after sessions with a man whose name he'd spent 3 decades trying to forget. Master Sergeant Clarence Townsend. He flipped to a page near the middle, a rough sketch of a throw, the same grip, the same hip angle, the same foot position. Conrad stared at the sketch, then at the frozen frame on his screen, then back at the sketch. His mouth went dry. He didn't know Jasper's last name. He'd never asked. In 3 years, he'd never once looked at his janitor's full name on a pay stub or employee file. Jasper was the janitor, mop man, the body. Now Conrad pulled up the personnel file. He scrolled to the name field. Jasper Townsend. His chair creaked as he leaned back. Townsend. The room felt smaller. The tattoos on his arms suddenly looked like what they were. Decoration on a man who had built everything he owned on a stolen foundation. For the first time in 30 years, Conrad Hartwell was afraid. Meanwhile, Officer Wallace was doing her job. She'd requested all available footage from the exhibition, not just Conrad's version, but every phone video posted online. She watched them side by side. In every angle, the same thing was clear. Jasper never initiated contact. Every movement was defensive. The throw was clean, controlled, and followed by an immediate offer to help Blake up. Wallace pulled Blake's medical records from the urgent care visit. The doctor's notes read, mild cervical strain, no structural damage, full range of motion expected within 5 to 7 days. She compared that to the police report, where Blake had claimed he could barely turn his head. She made a note in the file and requested a follow-up interview with Blake. Without Conrad present, something wasn't adding up. And Wallace was the kind of cop who didn't stop pulling threads until the whole thing unraveled. The hearing was held on a Thursday morning at the Charlotte Municipal Building, room 214. Long table at the front, 5 members of the City Athletic Commission seated behind it. Fluorescent lights. No cameras allowed inside, but a reporter from the county paper sat in the second row with a notebook. Councilwoman Patricia Hodges sat in the back corner. She wasn't on the commission. She'd come on her own after reading the media coverage. Something about the story didn't sit right with her. She wanted to see it for herself. Conrad arrived in his navy suit, clean-shaved, calm. He had Gail Prescott sitting behind him and a printed binder of evidence, his version of events, character statements from 2 instructors, and a copy of Blake's medical report. He looked like a man who had already won. Jasper arrived alone. Faded khaki pants, a white button-down shirt Ruth had ironed that morning. No lawyer, no binder, just a leather journal in his left hand. The commission chair opened the proceedings. Conrad spoke first. 5 minutes of rehearsed concern. I've dedicated my life to this community. My students' safety is my #1 priority. What happened at that exhibition was a failure of judgment. Mine for allowing it, and his for the violence he chose to use. He sat down. The room leaned his way. Then the chair called Denise Caldwell. Denise walked to the front table carrying a laptop. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. I've been a student at Hartwell Academy for 6 years. What I'm about to show you is 6 months of footage recorded during regular classes. She pressed play. The first clip, Conrad dragging Jasper onto the mat by his collar, slamming him 3 times during the Saturday seminar. The second clip, Conrad driving his knee into Jasper's stomach during a Wednesday class. The third, Conrad slapping Jasper's face, twice, while 40 students watched. The fourth, Conrad pressing his foot onto Jasper's chest after a throw, saying, "This is where a janitor belongs." The room changed. The commission members leaned forward. One removed her glasses. Hodges stopped writing and just watched. Denise kept going. Last October, during a sparring session, Mr. Hartwell grabbed a 16-year-old student named Tyler Moss by the hand and bent his index finger backward until it broke. He called it a training accident. Tyler's parents didn't file a report. I should have said something then. Her voice cracked. I'm saying it now. 3 parents in the room stood up, one after another. Each confirmed what they'd seen. The strikes, the language, the way Conrad treated Jasper not as an employee but as property. Conrad's jaw tightened. Gail Prescott scribbled something on a notepad and slid it to him. He didn't look at it. The chair called the next witness. A large screen at the front of the room flickered to life. Grandmaster Ellis Monroe appeared on a video call from a veterans care facility in Virginia. 88 years old, thin white hair, seated in a wheelchair. But his eyes were sharp, and his voice carried the weight of 6 decades in martial arts. My name is Ellis Monroe. I served in the United States Marine Corps from 1959 to 1968, stationed in Okinawa. During that time, I trained alongside my partner, Master Sergeant Clarence Townsend. Together, we developed a combat system based on Shotokan karate and judo principles. It was never commercialized. It was never sold. It was passed down personally. He paused. I've reviewed the footage of the exhibition. The techniques used by Mr. Jasper Townsend are authentic. They come directly from the system his grandfather and I built. I would recognize them anywhere. The commission chair asked, "Are you familiar with the Hartwell combat system?" Monroe nodded slowly. I am. It's a diluted copy of our work. The footwork, the grip positions, the hip mechanics, all borrowed, all simplified, all taken without permission. Silence in the room. I also know Mr. Hartwell personally, Monroe continued. He trained under Clarence Townsend for approximately 11 months, 30 years ago. He was expelled for using techniques to assault weaker students outside of class. Clarence removed him immediately and permanently. Conrad stood up. That's a lie. His voice was too loud for the room. Gail grabbed his sleeve. He shook her off. This man is 88 years old. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's senile. The commission chair said, "Sit down, Mr. Hartwell." Conrad sat, but his hands were fists on the table. The veins in his neck throbbed against the collar of his navy suit. The mask was slipping. The chair called Blake Emerson. Blake walked to the front. He was no longer wearing the foam collar. He stood, looked at Conrad, then looked at the commission. I need to correct my statement, he said. Mr. Hartwell told me to exaggerate my injury. My neck was not seriously hurt. The doctor confirmed mild strain. Full recovery in a week. He paused. The throw was clean. It was controlled. And after he put me on the mat, Jasper Townsend helped me up and bowed to me. Blake's voice tightened. That's more respect than I've received in 4 years at that academy. Conrad slammed his palm on the table. You ungrateful. Mr. Hartwell, the chair's voice cut through the room. One more outburst and you will be removed. Conrad's chest heaved, 260 pounds of muscle vibrating with a rage that had nowhere to go. The tattoos on his arms seemed darker under the fluorescent lights. He looked like what he was, a man watching his empire collapse in real time. The chair turned to Jasper. Mr. Townsend, would you like to make a statement? Jasper stood. He held the leather journal in both hands. My grandfather taught me everything I know, he said quietly. He never asked for credit. He never opened a school. He just believed the art should be passed down honestly. I didn't come to this city to fight anyone. I came because I needed a job. I mopped floors because that's the work that was available. And every night after mopping, I trained. Because that's what my grandfather taught me to do. Never stop. He opened the journal to a page near the back. He placed a photograph on the table and slid it toward the commission. The photo? 1964, Okinawa. 2 Marines sparring on a dirt floor, Clarence Townsend and Ellis Monroe. And in the background, at the edge of the frame, a young white man standing against a wall, watching. 22 years old, head not yet shaved, no tattoos yet, but the face was unmistakable. Conrad Hartwell. The commission chair picked up the photo, looked at it, looked at Conrad, looked back at the photo. Conrad's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His eyes locked on the photograph, on his own 22-year-old face standing in the room of the man whose life's work he'd stolen and repackaged as his own. The room didn't need a verdict to know the truth. It was already written on Conrad Hartwell's face. The commission delivered its ruling the following Monday. Conrad Hartwell's teaching license was suspended immediately, pending a full investigation by the North Carolina State Athletic Commission. Hartwell Academy of Martial Arts was placed under direct oversight. All classes were halted until a third-party review of training practices, safety protocols, and instructor conduct could be completed. The assault complaint against Jasper Townsend was dismissed. Officer Wallace's investigation report cited multiple inconsistencies in Blake Emerson's original statement, contradictory medical evidence, and 6 months of video documentation showing a sustained pattern of physical abuse by Conrad Hartwell against an employee. The report recommended further investigation into the October incident involving 16-year-old Tyler Moss. Blake Emerson left the academy the day after the hearing. He didn't make a public statement. He just packed his gear, left his black belt on the front desk, and walked out. 3 other students followed him within the week. Gail Prescott dropped Conrad as a client. The county paper ran a follow-up story the next morning. The headline read, "Local Dojo owner's combat system traced to stolen military training." The reporter had done her homework. She'd contacted the Marine Corps archives and confirmed Master Sergeant Clarence Townsend's service record, his deployment to Okinawa, and his honorable discharge in 1968. She'd also confirmed that no record existed of Conrad Hartwell ever serving in any branch of the military or completing any accredited martial arts certification prior to opening his academy. The story was shared 4,000 times in 2 days. Hashtag Mopmaster came back, but this time it didn't come alone. Hashtag Mopmaster movement started trending nationally. Community centers in 3 states reached out through social media asking the same question. How do we start a program like this in our neighborhood? Councilwoman Patricia Hodges answered that question. 2 weeks after the hearing, she called Jasper. Not through an assistant, not through an office. She called his phone directly. She told him the city was launching a pilot community self-defense program. Free classes, open to all ages, focused on safety and technique rather than competition. She asked if he would lead it. Jasper was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I'd like to name it after my grandfather." The Townsend Community Defense Program launched on a Saturday morning in March. The city provided a community center gymnasium with polished wooden floors. Flyers went up in barbershops, churches, laundromats, and the same coffee shops where Conrad's open house posters had once hung. 42 people showed up for the first class. Men, women, teenagers, a few senior citizens. Some had seen the videos, some had read the article. Some just wanted to learn how to protect themselves. Ruth Townsend sat in the front row. She wore the same dress she'd worn to Clarence's funeral 20 years ago. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her blood pressure pills, paid for now, sat in her purse. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The look on her face said everything. Jasper stood at the center of the mat, barefoot, clean white t-shirt, no gi, no belt. His faded blue janitor uniform, the one with the torn shoulder and the ink stain on the pocket, was folded neatly on a chair beside the mat, not hidden, not thrown away, placed there deliberately. A reminder of where he'd been, a reminder of what those hands had done before they taught anyone how to fight. He bowed to the class. Then he began. The same forms his grandfather had taught him on a wooden porch in North Carolina. The same techniques Ellis Monroe had helped develop on a dirt floor in Okinawa. The same system Conrad Hartwell had stolen, diluted, and sold for profit for 30 years. Now it was home. 3 months later, the North Carolina State Athletic Commission completed its review. Conrad Hartwell's teaching license was permanently revoked. He was barred from operating any martial arts instruction facility in the state. The Tyler Moss investigation resulted in a civil suit filed by Tyler's family. Conrad's legal fees consumed what was left of the academy's accounts. The building between the laundromat and the nail salon went dark. The gold letters on the sign were taken down by the landlord on a Tuesday afternoon. Nobody photographed it. Nobody marked the occasion. Some empires don't fall with a bang. They just go quiet, the same way they should have stayed from the beginning. 6 months after the first class, the Townsend Community Defense Program had a waiting list. 3 community centers in North Carolina, 2 in Virginia, 1 in Georgia, all running the same curriculum. The system Clarence Townsend and Ellis Monroe had built on a dirt floor in Okinawa 60 years ago. No franchise fees, no belt tests, no trophies, just technique passed from one person to the next the way it was always meant to be. Jasper never gave an interview. He turned down 2 podcast invitations, a TV appearance, and a documentary request from New York. Ruth told him he should do at least one. He told her he wasn't the story. She told him he was exactly the story. He smiled and kept mopping, because that's what people missed about Jasper Townsend. He didn't stop being a janitor. 3 nights a week, he still cleaned the community center gymnasium after the last class left. He mopped the same floors he taught on. He emptied the same trash cans. The only difference was that now, when he practiced alone at midnight, he didn't have to hide. Ellis Monroe passed away in April, 4 months after the hearing. He was 88. His obituary mentioned his Marine service, his Okinawa posting, and his role in developing a combat system that was never sold, but never forgotten. Jasper drove 9 hours to attend the funeral. He brought the leather journal. He placed it on the casket for 5 minutes, then picked it back up. Ruth stood beside him in the rain. Neither spoke during the drive home. The journal now sits in a glass case at the Charlotte Community Center. Page 43 is open, a hand-drawn diagram of the same throw Jasper used to put Blake Emerson on his back. Below the diagram, in Clarence Townsend's handwriting, "If you must fight, fight clean. If you must fall, fall quiet. If you must rise, rise for someone other than yourself." Denise Caldwell earned her instructor certification through the Townsend program. She teaches the Tuesday evening women's self-defense class. She still records every session, but now the footage goes into a training archive, not a locked folder. Blake Emerson enrolled in a judo school in Raleigh. He started over as a white belt. He told a friend he was learning the art the way it was supposed to be learned, from the beginning, with respect. Conrad Hartwell was last seen working at an auto parts store off Highway 74. He grew his hair out. He covered the tribal tattoos with long sleeves. No one in the store knew he used to run a martial arts academy. No one asked. The gold letters that once read, "Home of the Hartwell Combat System," were scraped off the strip mall window. The space is now a tax preparation office. The trophy cases were sold at auction. The framed TV segment ended up in a dumpster behind the nail salon next door. But 2 miles east, in a gymnasium that smells like floor wax and clean sweat, a thin black man in a white t-shirt stands barefoot on a polished mat every Saturday morning and teaches 40 people how to protect themselves without throwing the first punch. His grandmother watches from the front row. His grandfather's journal sits in a glass case by the door, and on the wall behind him, framed and lit, is the photograph from 1964. 2 Marines, 1 dirt floor, 1 system, built honestly, passed down with love. Finally home. If this story moved you, drop a comment and tell me, what's the skill you've been carrying in silence? Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that bell. Stories like Jasper's aren't finished. They're just getting started.
The story's over, but one thing keeps sticking with me. We usually think legacy is something you build. You open the school, hang the sign, put your name in gold letters, collect the trophies. That's how people remember you. But this story taught me there is a difference between building something and stealing something and putting your name on it. The scary part, most people can't tell the difference. The person with the sign and the trophies looks like the creator. The person who actually built it is scraping floors, invisible. That's what I keep thinking about. The real thing is almost always quieter than the copy. It doesn't need the cold letters, doesn't need a marketing budget. It just exists, passed from one hand to the next, quietly, honestly, the way knowledge was always meant to travel. The copy is loud, needs the spotlight, needs to make sure you never meet the original, because the moment you do, the copy falls apart. So the lesson isn't about fighting, it's about truth. The truth doesn't need a banner, doesn't need a brand. It just needs one person willing to carry it. Even if nobody sees them, even if they are mopping the floor of the building somebody else built with stolen plans. If you had been carrying something in silence, tell me about it. I read every comment, hit like, subscribe. See you next time.